It began with the bells. Not the pretty kind, not those that ring from towers or doorways, but the kind that live inside your head. Mira Vale heard them first on a Tuesday night, faint and metallic, like 1,000 distant clocks all slightly out of tune. At first, she thought it was tinnitus. She'd been working long hours, after all, restoring old recordings for the city's sound archive. Her apartment was littered with reels of tape, each one whispering static and forgotten voices. But the bells weren't static. They moved. When she turned her head, the sound drifted. When she held her breath, it paused. And when she spoke, just one startled word, the bells screamed in unison. That was when she noticed it. The air itself shivered around her words, like something unseen was listening, waiting. Mira tried to laugh it off, but laughter only made it worse. The ringing grew sharper, closer, as if the bells disapproved. By midnight, she'd stopped talking altogether. By morning, she'd realized something strange. The quieter she became, the calmer the sound grew. And so, Mira Vale began to learn the first rule of her new life. Silence wasn't empty. It was hungry. By the second night, Mira hadn't spoken a word. Her phone buzzed with unanswered messages. Her mother, her coworkers, a friend asking if she wanted to grab dinner. She typed replies, deleted them, and stared at the blinking cursor until the screen dimmed. Every sound seemed to press against her ears. The hum of the refrigerator, the pulse of her own heartbeat, even the faint whisper of air through the vents. Then came the footsteps. Thump. 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 Someone was pacing in the apartment above hers. Slow, deliberate. Not the restless scuff of someone who couldn't sleep, but the rhythm of a person counting. At first, she was relieved. Human noise, something normal. But when she pressed her ear to the ceiling, she realized the steps weren't moving across the floor. They were circling directly above her. One slow lap, then another, then a pause. And then, impossibly, the faintest whisper through the plaster. Too loud. Mira jerked back, slamming into her chair. Her breath came fast, ragged, too ragged, and at once the bells shrieked again, a deafening metallic clang that made her drop to her knees, hands over her ears. The footsteps stopped. The apartment fell silent. And in that ringing, suffocating quiet, she swore she could feel something crouched just beyond the ceiling, listening. The next morning, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that something was off in her apartment. The light looked different, too thin, as if the sun had to push through something invisible before reaching her windows. The air smelled faintly of iron and dust. She turned on her recorder, needing proof that she wasn't losing her mind. The machine whirred, its reels turning, capturing the hush. She stood perfectly still for 3 minutes, then stopped the tape and rewound it. Playback, silence. Then click, scrape, click. Her breath caught. The recording played a sound she hadn't made, a slow, deliberate dragging, as though something with long nails was crawling across the floor above her. The voice followed, warped and low, barely more than breath. Don't let them hear you. Mira froze. The bells were quiet now, eerily quiet, as though they too were listening. She replayed the tape, same words, same scrape. But when she checked her ceiling again, she saw something new. A hairline crack had appeared above her bed. From it, a single grain of plaster drifted down, landing on her pillow. And beneath that, faint but visible, was the curve of something dark, like a fingertip pressing from the other side. That night, Mira did something she swore she wouldn't. She stayed awake, waiting. The air in her apartment felt dense, like sound itself had weight. Even her heartbeat seemed muffled, trapped behind layers of cotton and fear. She sat at her desk, a single lamp on, the cracked ceiling glaring down at her. Her tape recorder spun again, capturing everything. Hours passed. No footsteps. No whisper. Nothing but the faint hum of the city through her walls. Then knock, knock, knock. 3 slow taps at her door. Not the polite rhythm of a neighbor, no. It was too soft, too careful, like whoever stood outside didn't want to be heard. She froze, every muscle tense. The bells began to ring again. Faint this time, warning her. Mira crept to the peephole. Empty hallway. But as she leaned closer, she felt it breath. Warm, steady, fogging the glass from the other side. Her hand jerked back. The doorknob twitched just once, then went still. And in the recorder's steady whir, another sound joined, a new voice, close enough to taste, whispering directly into the microphone. Quieter, Mira. They can smell the sound. She yanked the plug, heart hammering, but the tape reels kept spinning. Even without power, the morning came gray and wrong. Mira woke to the sound of nothing. No street noise, no traffic hum, not even the distant hiss of pipes through the walls. The city outside her window looked the same, but felt hollow, as if the world had taken one long breath and never let it out again. She reached for her recorder. Gone. Her desk was empty except for a thin smear of dust where the reels had sat. She turned in a slow panic. Half her things were missing: shoes, her kettle, even the photo of her parents from the bookshelf. It was as if someone had lifted them carefully away while she slept. On the floor, a single tape reel remained. The label read only one word: listen. Her throat tightened. She didn't want to. Every part of her screamed don't. But she had to know. She threaded the tape into her backup player and pressed play. Static. Then a sound like breathing, dozens of people, whispering, all at once, just beneath the static. The words were too fast to catch, too soft to understand, until one voice separated from the rest. You kept too much noise, Mira. They've taken what spoke. The tape clicked and stopped. Her apartment door, left locked the night before, was standing open, just a crack. Beyond it, the hallway waited, completely silent. Mira stood at the threshold for what felt like hours. The open door gaped at her like a held breath. Beyond it, no sound, no echo, just the thin hum of silence that seemed almost alive. She finally stepped out. The hallway stretched longer than she remembered. Each step made no sound. Not her slippers, not the creak of old boards, not even her breathing. She tried humming just to test the air, but nothing came out. Her throat moved, but the sound died before it reached her ears. Halfway down the hall, she saw it, a door she'd never noticed before. Faded green paint. No number. Just there, where the elevator should have been. And beneath it, a shadow. It didn't belong to her. It moved differently, sliding and pulsing as if it had a heartbeat. Then it paused, sensing her, and the knob began to turn, slow, deliberate, scraping metal against metal. Mira stumbled back, heart pounding in silence. The door opened just an inch, just enough for her to see a thin strip of blackness inside. Not darkness, blackness, like a hole torn into the world. Something whispered from within, not in words this time, but in shape, a vibration she felt in her bones. She didn't understand it, not completely. But she knew what it meant. Be still or follow. And then the door swung wider. Mira's instinct screamed to run, to slam her own door, hide under blankets, and pretend the world hadn't peeled open like wet paper. But she didn't. She took one step closer. Then another. The green paint on the door seemed to pulse faintly with her heartbeat. The blackness beyond it wasn't just dark, it absorbed light. The edges of the frame bent inward, as if gravity itself tilted toward whatever waited inside. She reached out a trembling hand and pressed her fingers against the door surface. It felt cold, impossibly cold, and slick, like glass submerged in deep water. Her reflection blinked back at her from the surface. Only, it didn't blink with her. Her reflection's mouth moved. No sound. But she could read the lips. Don't move. And then a sound. Her first in hours. Faint, but real. A high, keening whine, rising from deep within the black. It was like the sound of tape unspooling too fast, winding backward through time. Mira felt it pulling at her breath, her thoughts, even the memory of sound itself. Her ears popped, her body swayed. Then something grabbed her wrist from inside the darkness. Cold fingers, too many of them. She tried to scream, but the air swallowed the noise whole. The last thing she saw before the black pulled her through was her own reflection, still trapped on the door's surface. Watching her go, Mira woke to weightlessness. She was standing, or thought she was, in a place that didn't feel like ground. Everything around her shimmered in slow motion, gray upon gray, a world drained of both color and sound. No hum of air, no heartbeat, no echo. Shapes floated at the edge of her vision, outlines of objects she recognized: a chair, a kettle, her missing shoes, the photograph of her parents. All suspended midair like dust motes, motionless and still. She reached for the photo. Her fingers passed through it, and it rippled, dissolving into a ring of faint, silver bells. The same bells that had haunted her nights. They swirled around her like tiny, weightless ghosts, each one pulsing with a soft glow. And from somewhere deep among them came a voice, or what used to be one. "Every sound you've made lives here." The words weren't heard, but felt, like pressure against her ribs, vibrating through her teeth. Mira spun. The world rippled. Beneath her, a vast chasm yawned open, and in its depths she saw thousands of faces, pale, silent, wide-eyed, all mouthing words that made no sound. They weren't screaming. They were listening. And then she understood. These were the echoes of those who'd been too loud. Mira couldn't breathe. Or maybe she could, but breathing made no sound, no proof of life. The gray air pressed against her skin, and the silent faces below shifted, all turning upward at once. Thousands of eyes, unblinking. Her mind raced. There has to be a way out. She tried walking. Each step left faint ripples in the air, as if she were moving across water. The bells followed, circling closer, chiming soft, mournful notes that made her bones ache. She pressed her hands over her ears. "Stop," she mouthed, no sound. The bells grew louder, angry. Desperate, she decided to test it, to break the rule. Just one word. A whisper. "Hello." The moment her voice left her lips, the gray world shuddered. The air cracked open with a noise like glass screaming. Every face below lifted its mouth to match hers, thousands of lips forming the same word in perfect unison. Hello. 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 But none of them had voices. Instead, the sound burst from Mira's own throat again and again, multiplying, twisting, until her single whisper became a chorus. The ground beneath her gave way. As she fell, the bells clanged in triumph, deafening now alive, and the last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her again was one of the faces reaching toward her, her own face. It mouthed something she didn't have time to read. Then came silence. 2 days later, Mrs. Kolinsky from 4B realized she hadn't heard Mira in a while. Not that she'd ever been loud, quiet girl, always polite, headphones on, worked strange hours, but still, the silence felt off. Different. Too clean. When she pressed her ear to Mira's door, she expected faint music, maybe the hum of her old tape player. Instead, she heard nothing. Not "no one's home," nothing, true nothing. A hollow that pulled at her eardrum. "Sweetheart," she called softly. No answer. She knocked. Her knuckles hit the wood, but there was no sound. She felt the impact travel up her arm, but her ears caught only silence. Her breath hitched. The air tasted strange, metallic like blood and dust. She fumbled for her spare key. She'd watered Mira's plants before, after all, and pushed the door open. The apartment was spotless. Too spotless. Dust hung in the air, unmoving. And in the center of the living room stood the tape recorder, still spinning, though no tape was inside. As she stepped closer, her reflection shimmered faintly in its chrome surface. Her lips parted, but before she could speak, a voice, faint, delicate, echoed from the machine. "Shush, she's still learning." Mrs. Kolinsky stumbled back, clutching her chest. The air rippled, soundless, lightning flickering across the walls. And from the crack in the ceiling above Mira's bed, a grain of plaster fell. Then another. Then a soft, rhythmic tap-tap-tap, as though someone inside the ceiling were knocking, careful not to be too loud. Mrs. Kolinsky should have run. Any sensible woman would have. but the knocking, soft, patient, alive, seemed to call her name in rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Mira, she whispered. No reply. Her voice sounded wrong, thin and muted, like it didn't quite belong to her anymore. She dragged a chair beneath the crack and climbed up, balancing with one hand on the ceiling. The plaster flaked at her touch. Warm air pulsed through the fissure, a slow inhale, and then an exhale. She froze. Ceilings don't breathe. A faint hum rose from behind the wall, a recording, and she recognized Myra's voice, looping softly. Be still. They listened through the noise. The whisper vibrated through the chair legs and into Mrs. Kolinsky's bones. Her teeth buzzed. Her fingertips tingled. The plaster began to bulge, as though something inside was pressing outward. She stepped down quickly, heart pounding. Oh no, 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 she muttered, backing away. But the ceiling followed her, distending in slow, rippling waves. And then came the sound she'd been waiting for without realizing it. A single crack. White dust rained down. Then a hand. Pale. Still. The nails blackened with tape residue. It hung there, limp, until it twitched once and reached for her. Mira awoke in motion. It felt like being dragged through wet fabric, resistance, then release, resistance again. The gray world was gone, but this new place was worse. A narrow tunnel of pulsing plaster, veins of sound running like faint, trembling light through the walls. The walls breathed. With every inhale, dust rose. With every exhale, faint echoes bled through, whispers, music, laughter, screams, every noise she'd ever heard, alive again. She tried to crawl, but the air pressed her down. Something was behind her, scraping along the wall. A rhythmic pull, like an animal dragging itself closer. Then she saw them, faces, half-formed, pushing out from the plaster around her, mouths wide in soundless agony. Their eyes followed her, lips mouthing one word over and over. Quieter. Myra's heart thundered. Too loud. Too loud. The walls pulsed violently, closing in. Every heartbeat echoed, multiplied, filling the tunnel with pressure until her ribs ached. She covered her mouth and tried to still herself, but then she saw light ahead, a circle, a hole, and the faint shadow of someone standing just beyond it. A woman's silhouette, hands trembling. Someone in her apartment. Mira reached upward, pressing her palm to the plaster. It thinned beneath her touch, a fragile film separating one world from the next. And when she pushed through, her fingers broke the surface. On the other side, Mrs. Kolinsky gasped. Myra's hand broke through the plaster, reaching for air, real air, and for a split second, she felt warmth brush her fingers. Human warmth. But the moment her skin met Mrs. Kolinsky's, everything froze. She was suspended, half in the ceiling, half in her apartment, caught between silence and sound. The walls around her vibrated, humming with a deep, subsonic pulse that shook her teeth. Mira? Mrs. Kolinsky's voice quivered. Oh, dear, what are you? The moment she spoke, the ceiling shuddered. The sound of her voice rolled through the air like a shockwave, and the walls responded with 1,000 whispering breaths. Too loud. Too loud. Too loud. Mira saw them forming now, the pale faces pressing through the plaster, the trapped echoes of every voice that had ever broken the silence. They opened their mouths wide, the air rippling from their voiceless screams. Don't speak. Mira mouthed, tears streaking down her gray-tinged face. Please don't. But it was too late. Mrs. Kolinsky gasped, a small, involuntary sound. That single breath was all it took. The ceiling exploded in a cloud of dust and silence. Hands, hundreds of them, reached outward, grabbing whatever they could find. The old woman didn't even have time to scream. Myra's arm was yanked downward, the tunnel sucking her back in, the world above her vanishing into muffled stillness, once more. And for the first time, Mira understood the terrible truth of it. Silence didn't want to be broken. It wanted to consume. The drag stopped. Mira landed hard on something that wasn't quite ground, soft, uneven, pulsing like the skin of some massive creature. The air here was thick with whispers, layered on top of one another until they blurred into a constant, living vibration. She looked around. She was in a vast chamber. The ceiling arched endlessly overhead, stitched together from walls of plaster and tape reels, each reel spinning slowly, whispering faint, broken words. Faces moved within them, half seen through static, people speaking soundlessly from inside the reels. Their mouths moved in loops, repeating fragments of life. Laughter, shouts, lullabies, all stripped of noise. Every sound that had ever been taken had a home here. And in the center of the chamber stood something enormous, a shape woven from silence itself. Its surface shimmered with reflections of every person who had ever made a sound they shouldn't have. Thousands of Miras, Mrs. Kolinskis, and strangers Mira didn't know. It turned toward her. The air folded in on itself, forming the shape of a mouth. "You've learned," it felt, though no words were spoken. But not well enough. The reels on the walls began to spin faster, faster, their motion creating a faint vibration, not quite noise, not quite quiet. Mira clutched her ears, sinking to her knees. "Please," she mouthed, "I understand now. I'll be quiet." The silence leaned closer. Its surface rippled. "Then you may stay." The sound of her heartbeat vanished. For a long time, minutes, hours, maybe years, Mira stayed on her knees in that soundless cathedral of echoes. The walls breathed slow and deep around her. Every movement of the vast figure made the air flex like water. And she realized something. Silence wasn't absence. It was possession. Each of those reels turning on the walls wasn't a recording. It was a heartbeat, a memory, a life. Her fingertips brushed one nearby. For a second, she saw Mrs. Kolinski's face flicker within it, eyes wide, lips whispering something Mira couldn't hear. Then the reel spun faster, and her image blurred away. "No," Mira mouthed, shaking her head. "Not her. Not me." She stood. The bells began to stir around her again, faint, hopeful. And inside that faint chime she heard, impossibly, her own voice. The one she thought the silence had devoured. It said one word: "Run." She inhaled sharply. The first sound in forever. It was tiny, barely a gasp, but the chamber cracked. The great figure rippled, recoiling from the noise. Reels snapped free and burst like soap bubbles, releasing faint human sighs. Mira screamed then. Raw, defiant, beautiful. Every trapped voice screamed with her, a storm of noise ripping through the still air. The walls collapsed inward, folding light and sound together until nothing remained but ringing, pure and endless. And then, silence. When the rescue team found the apartment weeks later, it was empty except for one thing: Myra's tape recorder, sitting on the floor, a new reel inside. It spun endlessly, playing nothing but a faint hiss. But if you listened close, if you turned the volume all the way up, you could swear you heard a woman breathing. And beneath that breath, a whisper. "Sho."